G'day so-and-sos, welcome to my sewing room. My name's Kathy, and if you haven't guessed, today I'm going to be doing another trick or treat bag. So I did one a few weeks ago and it was really cool, but it's quite big. So aimed more at the bigger kids or the adult with a group of kids that's, stuck being the pack horse and carrying around all the sugar. So I thought I'd make one today for the littlies to be able to carry around themselves because we all know how much they love to do that. So I've come up with this pattern. It's fully lined and it's got a nice wide bottom on it to give it that nice wide mouth on it. So it's almost like a basket. So when they go up to the door and they're looking all cute and they're doing their little trick or treat, it's nice and wide and easy to just throw the candy into. So I've got my witch's brew ready. I swear it's just water. And I'm ready to go. So let's get cracking. Let's have a look at what we need for today's project. So I've got some cotton fabric. This is for my main piece. This is for my lining. And I have some fusible fleece for the interfacing for my main fabric. Now, if you want to, you could use some light interfacing for your lining fabric, but I don't want my bag to be too stiff or have too much structure. I still want it to be nice and soft because it is designed for little kids, so it'll be easier for them to carry. Then I have a rotary cutter, a marking tool, something to poke out the corners of my work, my scissors, snippers, and a ruler. Then I have my clips and I have some webbing for my handles. Now, if you don't have any webbing, you can make it out of your fabric and I'll pop the measurements up for that. Let's have a look at how we cut this out. So all three of my pieces are going to be exactly the same. They're going to be 20 inches by 11 inches. And then my straps are 15 inches long. And of course you need two of them. Now, if you're making your straps, if you're cutting it out of your main fabric, you want to cut a piece that is 15 inches long and 4 inches wide. And when you make your straps, let's pretend that's only 4 inches, you want to fold your sides into the middle and then fold in half again and then stitch down both sides to make your straps. Okay, so I'm going to take this over and I'm going to iron on my fleece onto my main piece and then I will see you back here. So there is my interfacing ironed on, and notice I gave my lining bit of an iron. I'm going to move my straps and lining out of the way and flip this over wrong side up and grab my ruler and a marking tool. Now I'm going to fold this in half and find my center and just give that a tiny little snip. Do that to both ends while I have it there. Little snip. It's just to mark our centers. Then what I'm going to do is grab my ruler and from that center mark, I am going to measure 1.5 inches to the right and to the left from that center mark. And then I'm going to measure 1.5 inches from this corner and then 1.5 inches from this corner. Then I'm going to take my ruler, flip it, line up this top edge with the top of the fabric so I know it's reasonably straight. And I'm going to measure and draw a line 1.5 inches from every one of those marks that I just made. All across, so I should have 4, 1.5 inches down. Then I'm going to draw a line from the end ones across to the edge, and they should be 1.5 inches too if you measure them. And then I'm going to connect these two lines, making sure again that it's at that 1.5 inches. So actually then what I'm going to do is just round off these corners a little bit, because I want them to just have that little bit of a curve to them so they sit a little bit flatter. Then I'm going to grab my scissors and I'm going to cut these out. So it's fine just to sort of eyeball those curves and freehand them. But if you wanted to, what you could do is then put that one like that, and you could use it as a template on all of your corners so that they're all the same. But I'm pretty confident with just being able to eyeball it, it'll be fine. So do this to both ends of your main fabric and then both ends of your lining fabric, and then I'll see you back here. So there is our lining and our main panel pieces done. Now I'm going to grab my main panel piece and my straps and my clips, and I'm going to clip that right in the center of that top tab piece that we just created. Make sure that there's no twist or turns in your strap, and then do the other edge. I'm just going to overhang those straps about 1 millimeter off the edge of that fabric, so I'll make sure that I do catch it at the sewing machine. And then I'm going to do the same thing at this end. Make sure there's no twists. And in the middle, if you wanted to measure it so it's like dead center, then go ahead, but I can be pretty confident eyeballing it. Then I'm going to grab my lining piece and lay that right sides together with the main piece. Now, if you haven't heard that term before, right sides together just means pretty side to pretty side. And then I'm going to line up those top edges where that strap is and just shift that clip to include that lining, making sure that that strap is still overhanging enough for me to be able to see it when I'm at the sewing machine, so I can be sure that I am grabbing it, because you don't want those to fall off. Cool. Then I'm just going to clip up the rest of that edge. Whack one in the side and then clip up the rest of that edge. And then we're going to take it over to the machine and we're going to stitch all along this clipped edge, all around the top, at 3/8 of an inch. So starting here, up, over, round, making sure that I try and curve a little bit. And I'm even going to go back and just do another sort of stitch length across the top just to make sure those straps are nice and held down. So clip your other end, put your straps on, and I'll see you over at the machine. Okay, so I'm going to start with my needle in my work at a good 3/8 of an inch. I'm going to back stitch here, and my seam length is at about 3 mil. So nice curve around that corner, up to the top. Pivot my work because I want those top corners to be square. Across my strap, back stitch across the strap even. Pivot my work and then curve around those bottom corners. Now, if you're wondering how I'm lifting my presser foot without my hands, I have a knee press on this machine, which is really handy. So up to this edge, lift my presser foot, pivot. Just because we want these top bits to be square, that's why I'm lifting and pivoting. I don't want these top corners to be round like I want those bottom curves to be. So go ahead and do this to the other side as well. And then I'll see you back at the table. Back stitch. So there's our top pieces sewn down. Now what I'm going to do is grab my scissors and I'm going to snip into these corners. So what I want to do is get my scissors and just snip down to that thread line, but being very careful not to hit that thread. I'm going to do this on all of my curves. Now this is going to help when we turn the bag out and iron it ready for top stitching. It's just going to help it sit that little bit nicer and that little bit flatter. So when we top stitch, it just looks really neat and professional. So around all of those. There we go. Now I'm going to turn my bag right sides out. Just like that. And I'm going to grab the straps, give them a gentle little tug to pop those corners out. And then I'm going to grab my little pink turning tool, which is called that purple thing with an A. But this one's pink because it's a knockoff. But I've got heaps of them everywhere around the sewing room. So you might see me using one at the sewing machine as like a stiletto to hold my work or to measure my seam. So they are a really handy little tool. So I want to pop these corners out and then I'm going to grab my iron. So these seams sit down a little bit nicer now. This big girl. Just because we clipped those edges. So it really is worthwhile paying attention when you do that to make sure that you curve them nicely. Okay, so we're going to iron all that down. I'll do the other end in a moment. And then what we're going to do is take this back over to the sewing machine and we are going to top stitch down at 1/8 of an inch all the way around both tops, both edges. Now you might have noticed too at the machine that I used a green thread, and that's because when I top stitch, I want that to contrast against the black. So think about your choice of color when you're top stitching, whether or not you want it to blend in or if you want it to contrast a little bit. So I'm going to clip this end down and then we'll take it over to the machine. Do the same thing to your other end and take it over to the machine and then we'll top stitch. Okay, so I've lengthened my stitch length to about a 4.5 and I've got my edge of my presser foot right up against the edge of that fabric. Now this is a zipper foot or a 1/8 foot. So I know that I'm 1/8 away from that edge. Now I'm not going to back stitch there because those side seams will soon be sewn into the bag, so I don't need to worry about that strength there of those stitches not coming undone, and I don't want that double line of stitching to show on that edge. Now this green fabric, green thread that I chose to do the top stitching with, I'm really liking. It's contrasting really nicely against that black, and I've got the green kitties in that fabric as well, so it matches up. So if you're reasonably confident of laying down a pretty straight-ish top stitch, think about the contrast, think about the color that you're using when you are top stitching, because it is to hold down the seam, but it's also decorative. To that end, do the same thing to the other end, and I'll see you back at the table. Okay, we're all top stitched down, and that's also helped to reinforce our handles because we don't want our handles falling off once it's got a lot of sugar in it, because then the child is not going to be happy if all their treats end up on the ground. Okay, what we're going to do now is flip it over lining side up, and then we are going to fold it in half that way, and then smooth down that lining bit inside. Just like that, and we're going to clip the edges so I can feel that lining. We're going to sew down these sides at 3/8 of an inch. So let's head back over and do that. Okay, so shortening my stitch down to around a 3. So we're starting at the bottom, so that sort of stretches everything out. Back stitch, and then all the way to the top, and then back stitch again. Cool. Okay, there she is. Now what we're going to do, we're going to make sure that we cut both sides. Yes and yes. Now I'm going to grab my ruler and I'm going to lay that along that side, close to the stitches, to the outside of the stitches, but not on them. And I'm very carefully going to get my rotary cutter, being careful not to hit those stitches, and trim up that side. Now I'm having to put a lot of pressure on that. So notice how I've got my fingers spidered like that, so they're not flat. So if my rotary cutter does slip or my ruler slips, there's less chance of me cutting myself. Okay, and same thing on this end, nice and close to those stitches, but not touching them. If you did want to use scissors to do that, then that's fine as well. Okay, cool. Now what we're going to do is turn our bag inside out. Now this technique is called French seaming. I didn't want to tell you that at the beginning because it sounds fancy and it sounds a little bit intimidating. And I didn't want you to hear that and then think, oh no, I can't do that, because of course you can. You're doing it and you're fine. But we often tend to, and I know especially when I first started learning how to sew, we tend to self-sabotage a little bit. And so, you know, if you hear a term that you haven't heard before, then it can be really intimidating. So if you're doing this along with me, you are French seaming and you should be proud of yourself. Okay, and it's really easy, but a really effective, neat, strong way of bag making. So learning this technique will definitely do you well in the future. So give that a good iron down, and then what we're going to do is take it back to the machine again, and this time we're going to sew down this edge with that seam in there. So I can feel where the edge of that seam that we just sewed is. So I'm going to feel with my finger as I sew and just get to the outside of it. I don't want to go on it or in front of it, because then I'll have little raw edges showing through that seam. So again, start at the bottom and work our way up to the top. Let's go do that. Okay, so starting at the bottom, feeling for that seam, making sure I've got enough of a seam there. Needle down, and I'm going to back stitch. So the side of my foot is lining up, is pressing up against that seam inside. I can feel it, and you should be able to feel it too. That lining wants to bunch up on me a little bit, so I'm just going to lift my foot and smooth that out a tad, all the way up to the end, and then back stitch. Same thing on the other side. There we go. There's those sides sewn down. Now I'm going to flip it out and check out these sides and see how we did. So poke those corners right out and push those seams out with your hand. Now have a look. Now I've caught all of those side bits, but if you can see any little frayed bits or any of your inside seam, take it back over to the sewing machine and just go a little bit wider. Turn it back inside out like we did on the lining side, and just lay another row of stitches down just a little bit to the left of where those ones are, and you'll be fine. There's always a fix. Okay, so I'm going to grab my iron again. So you French seamed. How cool is that? Very good. You're a bag maker. Okay, let's iron these sides down nice and flat. And we want the bottom nice and flat too. Because if you wanted to leave it like this, you could. But be brave. Come along with me. And what we're going to do is box these bottom corners so that it gives the bottom of our bag a little bit of shape and a little bit of a bottom. So when the kids go up to the door with their bag to trick or treat, it just makes the mouth open a little bit more and the bottom flat. But like I said, if you want to leave it like that, that's fine. But I'm going to box these corners. So what I'm going to do is turn my bag sideways like that, and I'm going to match up. I'll show you again because I was talking. These tabs, our strap tabs, I'm going to turn my bag sideways and then match them up. And then I'm just going to fold this seam, side seam down to create a corner down the bottom there. Flip it over and make that side nice and neat too. And just work that out. Okay. Right. Then I'm going to take this side, the top side that I've got facing up. I'm just going to flip it up out of the way. Then I'm going to grab my ruler and a piece of chalk. And I'm going to measure across that corner 2.5 inches. So I'm 2.5 inches from here to here. And I can see that I've got that line running down to that point. That's at the 1.5 inch mark there. And just give myself a chalk line over there and whack a couple of pins. Not pins, what are they called? Clips. See, I told you. I always say the wrong word for things. I've done it my whole life, so it's not like, anything wrong. I mean, it probably is, but, it's normal for me. So, sorry. I usually catch it in editing and put the right word up on screen. Okay, so fold that side up and do the same thing to the other corner. So 2.5, about there, and go across. Now, if you wanted to, you could measure up that way and up that way to make sure you're perfectly even. It would be 2 inches up either edge. But again, it is pretty easy to eyeball. But if you've never done it before, then by all means. Now we're going to take it over to the sewing machine and we're just going to stitch along these chalk lines, making sure to fold the rest of your bag out of your way when you do each corner. Let's go do that. Okay, so I'm going to work on this bottom one first. So the rest of my bag is folded up and out of the way. And I'm on a 3mm stitch length. Start with my needle in my work. If you need to use a hump jump, then go ahead and use one. If you don't have one, you can fold up a bit of fabric a couple of times and it will work just as well, but my machine's pretty good. Slowly over all that middle seam bit and backstitch. And then flip it over, make sure most of your bag is out of the way. Needle in, backstitch, slowly work over that seam, backstitch. There we go. There's our two corners. Now, same thing as what we did before. We're going to trim these down, but this time we're going to use scissors because it's just too thick to use a ruler and rotary cutter, and we want to be safe in the sewing room. And then other one all the way across. Okay, get rid of those threads. Cool. Okay, now see how that just gives it that nice sort of basket shape. Okay, now we're going to turn it back out so it's lining sides out, and we are going to French these seams just like we did with this side. So poke those edges out really well. Okay, then we're just going to fold those edges. Just roll that seam a little bit in your hands. Grab your clips and just whack a couple of clips on there just to hold it in place. And same on the other side. Make sure you push those corners out and then clip it. And then we're going to take it back to the machine and do exactly what we just did on the sides. We're going to sew, squish your bag down, and we're going to sew along this edge, feeling for where that seam is, so it'll be a good 1/4 inch of a seam allowance at least, and go across that edge on both sides. Okay, starting right where those other stitches finished on the side, feeling where that seam is, smoothing out my fabric, backstitch, and all the way down along that edge and backstitch. Okay, there are our corners boxed off and French seamed. So that's a really handy technique to have in your skills basket. So let's turn this out the right way and push out those corners. Sorry if you hear groaning. Elvis is in here having a nap on the floor, and Tron Cat is down there clawing my ironing mat. So pop it out the right way, and there we go. There's our final product. Now, it really is worthwhile boxing those corners at the end rather than just leaving it flat, because you just get this beautiful, nice, big, wide mouth. So when your littlies go up to the door and they're all cute in their costumes and like they're holding their bag open, it's nice and ready for all those treats. Okay. If you go and make some of these for your kids or to make them to sell, I'm fine with that. It's a pattern that I've drafted up, but I'm quite happy for you to use my pattern as much as you like. And if you manage to sell them, then more power to you. Just put a link, if you put them on Insta, put a link to my page, just so people can find me, and that will help promote me as well. And I really appreciate you coming along today. If you liked it, as usual, like and subscribe, comment, all that jazz. And remember, it is only fabric. We can always buy more. The shops are full of it. Okay, have a great day and happy Halloween. Bye. Bugger.